welcome guys. My name is Antoniette Aizon. I am a psychology and human services faculty here at Madera. I am also the OER program coordinator here at Madera. This week is Open Educational Resource Week, and each day of the week we have some sort of a training schedule. For this session, we are going to cover accessibility training. So we're going to go through Word, PowerPoint, PDF, and Canvas. The cool thing about this training is whatever skills that you will learn throughout this training, you are actually going to be able to use it in general anyways. So in your mind, why is it important that we need to look at accessibility? Anybody?
Sorry.
Sharing of the knowledge.
Sharing of knowledge. I'm sorry, Dr. Stewart, you're going to say something.
Yeah, it's just everybody, all students should have an equitable access to educational materials.
Absolutely.
And sometimes some people don't require any extra special access. Other people require a little bit and others require a lot more. So it's all trying to get so that everybody so that the access is equitable, so everybody has a opportunity to learn.
Yep. So accessibility really is about equitable experience, having the same information, being able to interact. These services should be available to everyone regardless of their ability. One, it's the right thing to do. Two, it's a smart thing to do. And above all, and Scott nailed it in the chat, it is a legal requirement. I attended an online teaching conference several years ago, and the discussion was on accessibility. To what extent do we need to make things accessible? And one of the ladies who shared her story, she was actually one of the faculty members that was listed in a lawsuit because materials were not accessible. So at the end of the day, if we do not make our information accessible, we don't do our due diligence, we could potentially be sued. So it's a legal mandate, just do it. So there are 4 principles for accessibility. According to the World Wide Web Consortium, they developed content accessibility guidelines around 4 principles. So perceivability. Users must be able to perceive the information that is being delivered. So this could be via touch, hearing, sight. Has anybody ever messed with their television to change their accessibility features where it actually describes the scene of what's going on in the television? For those who don't have sight, having those descriptions, green mountains in the background, is very useful so they can actually picture what's going on. It has to be operable. Users must be able to operate the interface using the information that is presented to them. And what that means is being able to use keyboards or hotkeys. So in front of me, what I typically use to test people's accessibility is the up and down arrow key on the keyboard. If you can move through the information just using your arrow keys, then you've done a pretty good job in terms of allowing an individual to use hotkeys with information. We also have to provide material that is understandable. So the content and the interface presented may not exceed the person's ability to comprehend or navigate. When there are too many things going on, unfamiliar terms need to be defined. There should be a glossary. If we're showing a chart of data, especially if it's a bar graph, there needs to be some sort of a description so the student or the individual who has issues with vision will be able to interpret that particular bar of data. It has to be robust. So content must be accessible and be able to be interpreted in a variety of assistive technologies. So in terms of assistive technologies, we do actually have a few items at our college. We have Kursewell. We also have Easy Reader. So for us, we're going to start with creating accessible documents. If you create OER content in Word, it makes things a whole lot easier. If you create OER content in PowerPoint, we want to make sure that there is accessibility with everything that we created. I would not recommend starting with a PDF. PDFs are a little tricky. Usually do it as a Word, fix it, then convert it to a PDF, and then make the necessary changes. Canvas also has some really cool features, and if you are following what is available to you in the rich content editor, you're guaranteed to have a much easier accessible document. So for this training, we are going to go through Word, not so much PowerPoint, because if you know how to use the navigation above PowerPoint and the tools associated with PowerPoint, makes things a whole lot easier. Same with Excel, and then PDF, again, do a Word file, convert it to a PDF, make the necessary changes. We are going to look at the best practice when it comes to alternative text when we have images. We're going to define how to use appropriate descriptive hyperlinks. We're going to look at closed captions and transcripts for all videos. So at our district, we have 4 different colleges. 3 of the colleges uses Panopto in terms of our recording. That has an AI added caption that is about 90% correct. One of the colleges uses Canvas Studio. The AI generated captions is not as good as Panopto, but it is still our responsibility to go in, make sure that our closed captions are adequate, well, they're correct, and they actually make logic sense. If I turned on AI right now to do a closed caption, chances are it's nearly perfect, but it is not 100% perfect. So it is still our responsibility to go in and edit. With Panopto, which 3 of our colleges use, it actually allows us to download transcripts, audio files of the recording. So to create navigation and tagging in your document, you should select from one of the headings in your ribbon. Using the tools that you have available to you makes life a whole lot easier. It also gives logic sense to a screen reader. How many of you guys, when you create documents, Word or even in Canvas, use the heading tool, level heading 1, 2, 3, and so forth? I saw some nods identifying yes. I see some hands that said yes. Perfect. Because essentially what it does is it allows the screen reader to identify what the different content is, and it allows the student to skip certain headings if they don't need to read it and go into the next one instead of having to read through every single area. So in terms of tips for creating accessible documents, if you're going to use a list, don't emulate the list using tabs, spaces, or special characters. Use the list feature in Canvas, or the list feature in Word, the list feature in PowerPoint. In terms of list, you can either do bullets or you can do 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're going to do bullets, that does not mean there is a logical order. It's just you got to hit this, 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 and this. Whereas if you use the numbers 1, 2, 3, it tells the reader that it has to be in that order. So when you use lists, be really mindful. Is it just bullet points that you need them to know, or is it they need to go through step 1, 2, 3, and so forth? Tables. Keep tables as simple as possible. Avoid using subdivided columns or rows or merge cells. The tricky part about merge cells is screen readers get a little bit funky with that because they're not quite sure how to do it. If you create tables within Canvas, it's also going to ask you to put a heading on that table to identify what that table is. You can use the table features. You don't have to create tables using tabs or spaces. You designate either the heading as a row or a column as a row. So the way that this slide is laid out, the heading, the column and the rows are both headings. So don't use tables to simulate layout or to position a graphic element on a particular page. There is another tool that you can do that, and it's within the editing of the picture and format. Because otherwise, it has some difficulty with reading that particular element. In terms of formatting, use the center button instead of hitting tab, 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 or space, 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 space. For some screen readers, if you hit tab, if they are that sensitive, it will actually say tab, 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 tab until it gets to that text. Same goes with spaces. So if you need to have something centered, use the center justify in the feature. If you want to move it a little off center, you can always toggle the ruler to move and shift things around. Make sure that you are using headers instead of typing a large text to denote a particular heading. An individual who is using a screen reader will not see a stylistic change. They will not know that you're trying to emphasize that point or that is a particular subpoint. In terms of text, there are certain texts that you should not use in terms of font. The ideal would be sans serif type of font like Courier, for instance, or Arial, at least at a 12-point font. Colors are good to highlight information. However, for those that have screen readers or for those that are colorblind, they might not be able to see their colors. I remember in one of my earlier days of teaching, I highlighted terms specifically in color. I did not bold, I did not italicize. I wanted them to highlight in, I use green. Green and red are difficult, and it's one of the higher levels of blind coloredness for people. So I had a student who did not know that they were colorblind, and I did not know they were colorblind until after the first exam when I told the student, did you pay attention to the color items on the PowerPoint slide? And the student told me no, and I'm like, well, it's in green. Every item that is in green is what you need to pull to help you study. Student didn't even know, student was not aware that there were colors because the student could not see it. So colors are good if it's for seeing folks, but if you want to also highlight that point, try to use either bold. I would stay away from it, italicize because it's a little difficult, or you can underline it. Screen readers do not indicate color. So for folks who are colorblind, for folks who are using screen readers, they will not know if you're trying to highlight information that is in color. Also, some colors are hard to read. So certain types of greens, yellows is challenging. Certain features of red, teal, those are colors that are not necessarily easily detectable. Unfortunately, with Word or PowerPoint, they do not check color contrast. Canvas does though. So Canvas will act, when you pull the accessibility checker, it will actually show you that it is difficult to see. If you have a white background, make sure you have a strong dark color. If you have a dark background, make sure you have a very light color. You want to make sure that there is enough of that contrast. So whenever possible, use black and white for your text. So in terms of slide decks, use the one that is created in PowerPoint. Whenever you try to insert text box and put information in, it requires more steps for you to indicate the reading order to ensure that the content is being followed in a logical fashion. So use what is already preset in Canvas instead of trying to be creative. Avoid adding extra text boxes on individual slides. It becomes challenging because it could be that it's jumping around. Use smart art or alternative text. Check color contrast. Not all PowerPoint color palettes are accessible. This one was a little on the border, in all honesty. In terms of navigation, use built-in styles available and mark headings to the right heading style in the style ribbon. I cannot say this enough. Please don't hit tab key, don't hit spacebar key. Use the enter key. If you need to identify spaces, like there's a gap, you can do a file format on that line that says increase or decrease spaces in between instead of enter, enter, enter. Break up content into shorter bite-sized pieces that are easy to remember. Avoid complex sentences, which might be difficult to understand, especially when it is a screen reader. So they're having to process the information in an audio format. That can be challenging if you have a whole lot of information in at once. Let's see. Salome and I created syllabus templates that help us meet accessibility requirements. We use the font style a lot. Yep. And a lot of it is just once you learn it, just have it as your habit. And then it becomes second nature and you don't have to worry about accessibility. So the easiest part, I think, in terms of making your document accessible is having descriptive alternative text and descriptive hyperlinks. So there are some rules when it comes to this. For alternative text for images, you have to think about the purpose of the image. An alternative text is a written description of an image. So if it's for decoration, or you want just a different look at it, you can be minimal in terms of your description. But if that graphic has a lot of information, you might want to consider, is it an appropriate graphic to present? Can I present it in another manner? But if you really want the graphic, do you need to create an additional document that a person with a screen reader can actually look at the contents? If the description needs to be clear in terms of what they're looking at, then that should be provided in the alt text. With Word, PowerPoint, there isn't a restriction in terms of the alt text, but you also don't want to have the alt text box being that extensive. In Canvas, you're very limited in terms of the characters that you can put in terms of the alt text. So when we're looking at alt text, what content are you trying to communicate, in what context, and what is the function of that image? So those are the three things to remember when you are going to describe an image. That's a really good question. Infographics, if they make sense, they're useful, yes. And for those who can see, infographics are a great way to present information. But you also need to consider, for those folks that cannot read that information, how can you create, either you can create another document that actually provides in text format what is being described in that infographic. It really depends, like if you're talking about bio, and you have a really good infographic that you wanna share out, how can you convert that infographic in meaningful text verbiage so a student who is using a screen reader or a student who has disability can actually follow along? So you're really being mindful of the purpose of that infographic. So in terms of the image that you see there, if this is just for decoration, what are some recommendations that you would have to describe the theme? If this is just for decoration, you need to break up your PowerPoint. You can unmute, share, or you can type into the chat. I'm open to whatever. I'm talking about this image, just to be clear. If you had to describe this image, it's because it's being used for decoration, how would you describe it? You can do a desert landscape, desert rocks, arid desert land, desert climate. You can describe the clouds. There's it looks like Joshua trees as well. But if it's for, say, a geography class and you want to highlight this particular type of topography, how would you describe it? Anybody teaching geography in this group tonight?
Yeah. Okay, so
I did not think that was going to happen. So perfect.
okay, so it's kind of a tough read, but it looks like okay, yes, rock formations in the background, but it looks like the rock has undergone considerable physical weathering, possibly maybe not mostly physical weathering, and so they are much more rounded. There are no sharp edges to them. So it's been more so, and some of that can be spheroidal weathering. The minerals are differentially uh, heated, and so it can cause expansion. So the rock fractures and breaks off. Could be you're right about the Joshua trees. But I might say xerophytic vegetation, a mixture of there looks like there's some succulents, and there's also oh gosh, and I'm drawing a blank on the vegetation because some of it has got the more it's a lighter in color, and so some of that growth is used to reflect incoming solar radiation so that the plant doesn't get too hot. But I'm a talker, and so if I were to do I'd have to do something. I don't know if I would it be better to do an audio or alternative text for something like this?
It could be both, honestly. Because you can link an audio file when they click on that image, and you can actually put at the bottom description of the image, and then they can click on it and then just make sure there's a hyperlink, and then they get to actually hear the vocabulary associated with how you're describing it. It could also be that you use very descriptive words and you're highlighting vocabulary words from your discipline to identify how does this look. But I like the idea, in all honesty, by having an audio file attached so the student can actually hear. Even if the student cannot, even if the student can actually see it, you're using vocabulary in your area. So this will also give them additional practice in terms of terminology as well. So I like your idea a lot.
Because I'd be typing for years. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
Absolutely. So that's why we have to be really mindful of the content, the context. What do we want that image? What do we want our students to get out of that image? So let's see, when describing an image, you need to think about what you're trying to excite, the imagination or the mind, scientific terminology, along with descriptive common language. I don't know if you guys are seeing the chat. So Scott is providing some amazing discussion going on in the chat. So I'm trying to pick some of it out. So how to write an effective alt text. The number one rule for adding alternative text is to describe the function or the message being communicated, not just a description. So Dr. Stewart, with what you were describing, I was getting the sense of the vocabulary, what you're using in class. So it made perfect sense to me in terms of what you're trying to highlight in that image. So include context of the picture. How does it relate to the page where it appears? What does it illustrate? For example, a male graduate education student interacting with fourth graders in a science lab provides a meaningful context in detail as opposed to a picture of a student. Also consider the emotions being expressed in the image as well. If you work in the social sciences, you're trying to describe how a person is reacting to something, you're going to look at those nonverbal cues and explain what is being depicted in the image. Don't use words like image, picture of, or click, because the screen reader is already going to do that. So it's going to say picture of, picture of. So the screen reader explains that to the person who's using it. So an alternative text, image of an apple, would read out loud, image, image of an apple. So you don't have to put image, you don't have to put table, just put a description of it. Be succinct. Your alternative text should be short enough for a tweet. Alternative text shouldn't be longer than 100 characters. If it's longer than that, then it might be something that you would need to have a document that they can click and it reads it to them. If an image is purely decorative, you have an option of actually clicking the box that says decorative. And then the screen reader just basically jumps that over. So don't repeat the same alternative text for multiple images, as it adds no context for what is being conveyed. And it'll also get the student lost in terms of what they're trying to, what it's actually reading. Any legible text on an image must appear in the alternative text. So that's where the question about infographics. So you want to make sure students who are see exactly all the information that is in an infographic. For those who are using a screen reader, they are not going to be able to see that. So you will actually need to put that information in a document, and you can link the document to that image as well. So they know if they want to know additional information about what is in the infographic, they'll click on a button to go to take them to a document. And then they can read the information in the document. So most important step in making an accessible infographic is to include a thorough alternative text description that conveys verbally the information presented in the graphic. So this could be through alternative descriptions. An accompanying infographic will have a text equivalent at the end of each element within the infographic with a period. Otherwise, the screen reader reads it as one entire sentence. You also want to make sure that you have the sufficient color contrast. So you can actually use a site called WebIM. It's an added tool in Google or Chrome navigation, and it can actually check your color contrast. At the end of this presentation, I will actually share this PowerPoint so you can download it, and then all of these hyperlinks will give you the resources as well. So what you're seeing right now is actually an example of descriptive hyperlinks. So descriptive hyperlinks contains keywords that describe the link destination and provides the website address to the student. So this is where it becomes really interesting. If you are creating digital versions, you want your hyperlinks to look like this. If you are going to print the information, because it's printed media, they can't actually see what the hyperlinks are. You're also going to need to be able to do this. So you might have two versions, one that is strictly digital with the appropriate hyperlinked information, or if it's printed, you're going to need to actually put in the URL. If you do this type of hyperlinking information in a digital document, the screen reader is actually going to read https://ASE, like it will actually read everything, which can be really irritating. Compared to if you do this, the do in the hyperlinks, the screen reader would actually say, contained in the ASCCC accessibility resources, click on the hyperlink. And that's why we don't say click here, because click here, absolutely meaningless. Where is that going? So when you actually use the insert hyperlink in the actual name of what you're trying to get them to click at, it tells them ASCCC, accessibility resources, and then they can click on the hyperlink to go there. So when adding text-based descriptive links with a document, carefully choose which words to hyperlink. I typically use the title or the keywords. It allows students to use keywords to search documents, give more details to users with a functioning vision who can scan your web page, provides context to individuals without who can't see that are using assistive technology. Sighted people visually scan pages to see what is text, and we can see when it is hyperlinked. When a screen reader reads it, it will actually tell what is a hyperlink. Any questions on that? I'm going to go through stuff and then we're going to go practice. So in terms of accessibility in Canvas, the trick is using the rich content editor, because this has built-in accessibility tools. This detects common accessibility errors with headings, with colors. It does not, however, check for URL. It will also tell you whether or not you have an alt text with your image. You will have the little person at the bottom, or the little person will have a number, tells you how many errors. And you want to make sure when you fix all of those, and they do actually give you prompts, you get the balloon on the screen, which is always exciting, kind of like a visual reward. So some things to look at is check for adjacent links. So these are links with the same URL. They should be a single link because it can be confusing. Verify that there are no errors in the link. The way to do that in Canvas, when you go into settings, validate link content, and then it will actually pull from your Canvas shell all of the URLs that are either broken or it seems like it's broken. I think you can manually check each and every one of them to make sure that the link is working, or if it's not working, and unfortunately with ASCCC, their links change often, you need to make the edits. In terms of heading paragraphs, headings should not contain no more than 120 characters, and it will actually tell you. Canvas also does not like you to use level heading 2 and then jump to level heading 4. It'll tell you to fix it because they want a logic in terms of the heading. Images should include an alt text that describes the content. In some cases, when you upload a file, it will actually default the file name as the alt text, and it'll have the ending of .jpeg or what other extensions there are for picture files. So it will tell you go in and fix it. The alt text limits you to 120 characters, so you have to be really succinct in how you describe it. In terms of large text contracts, text larger than 18, or if it's bold 14, should display a minimum contrast ratio of a 3:1. List should be formatted as list. So this could be either bullets or numbers. Sequential headings need to be done, otherwise it won't pass the accessibility checker. Table captions will tell you how to label that table. It also tells you to identify what the heading is. Is it the row? Is it the column? Or is it both? So I will be submitting the PowerPoint in chat, so you guys have information in terms of resources. So if you can, go ahead and open up a Word document. Any Word document that you have will suffice. And while you're doing that, I'm going to highlight one of my courses. This is my Psych 42 course. It is an OER course, it is a math course. So I basically built it into Canvas. And the way that I have done this allows for the most inclusive access possible. In Canvas, there is an immersive reader. The great thing about the immersive reader is, especially if you have students who have English as their second language, it allows for the content created in that Canvas page or that Canvas section to read to you.
Access to textbook. Textbook. This course is primarily created with faculty's open education notes created.
Just going to pause. I'm not going to have the entire screen be read. With the immersive reader, it also allows us to change our text preferences. It also allows us to change contrast. I personally do better with dark background and white text. If you toggle, if they're learning English, it will tell you what are the nouns, what are the verbs, what are the adjectives in color, which is really awesome. And being English as a second language to me, this helps. Let's see. Reading preference allows you to read line by line. You can even choose a language, which is awesome. We did actually test it out. It's actually pretty good. So when possible, I try to create content within Canvas itself because I want to utilize Canvas immersive features as much as possible. You can even change the voice setting and the speed of the voice as well, which is fantastic. So aside from using Canvas Immersive Reader and building content within Canvas, absolutely, yes, particularly for ESL students, being able to read it and see it in English and hear it in English, and then being able to translate it into their other classes or their native language helps, because then they're making sure that they're understanding the content. Yes, my syllabus is actually, I haven't gotten that far yet, but I do the way that, see, that becomes tricky when it's ESL exams, when it's other language exams, that I don't know yet. Yeah, very, very tricky. So not only do I build content within Canvas because of the immersive reader, those are some questions that I personally cannot answer because that's not my area. So that might be a group of faculty needing to come together and see what can we do to be able to use this tool, but make sure that it doesn't get abused. So what I also have is a hyperlinked Office 365 document. So a lot of the content that I have created is in Word, including the formatting of the equations using the equation builder within Word. The reason why I did that is they also have an immersive reader. They also have an accessibility mode. So this is Microsoft's version of their immersive reader. Very, very similar to Canvas.
Guide to Statistics for Social Sciences. Created by Doc.
So they can also use the immersive reader as well when it's an Office 365 document. Same color contrast, language as well is available through Office 365. Okay, are we ready to play? That is actually Office 365, the Word version. And I insert the hyperlink from OneDrive and I get a copy of the hyperlink. You can actually restrict whether they have to be logged into their Office 365 or if you want everybody, regardless of their login, to have access, and you can toggle where they can only view it, but they can't download it. So when it comes to Word documents, using the ribbons at the top is the easiest way to get yourself comfortable with accessibility and reduce the amount of issues. So your Office 365 Microsoft Word should default to Calibri body. You can change the text, just make sure to be mindful of the accessibility and readability. Let's see, we can talk about syllabus. When we can put our name, we want it to be visually appealing, but we also want to make sure that it is meeting the principles of accessibility. So in the Home tab, you have varying tools. So I'm in the paragraph section. This is left justified if you want it flushed to the left. Center, so don't hit tab, 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 tab to move things in the middle. And then right justified. This one is justified. Usually in legal writing, they want it like flushed to the left and the right. I find that a little bit weird. And then this one is the spacing. If you want to identify more spacing to give distance without having to hit enter, 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 this is what you would use. So in terms of styles, this gives you where you can find the level headings. So usually I like to start with level heading number 1. I do actually modify to center justified. And then in this case, the way that Word is defaulted when I do have level headings, it's color. You have an option of either keeping it that same color, but I would highly, highly recommend if it's a white document, black text. And I'll do the color contrast at the end. So by hitting enter, it goes flush to the left, but there isn't really as much spacing. So if I want to have a spacing, what I can do is either highlight the second line and do a line spacing from the top, or put my cursor at the end of the first line and do a line spacing from below. It really is your option of what you want. So I'm going to go into the line spacing area, line spacing options. When I do before, that is above. If I do after, that is below. So I want to move it to 30. So visually, for those who can see things, we can see that there's a gap and it looks like there is an order. For those who are seeing a screen reader, they're not going to hear enter, 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 because it's just statistics for social sciences, Dr. Antoniette Aizon, instead of enter, enter, Dr. Antoniette Aizon. If you're going to use level heading 1, if you're going to move to a different section, you want to highlight that chunk, then start it off with level heading either 1, if it's an entirely different section, if it's related but a subpoint, level heading 2, and so forth. Kind of the way that APA does their level headings when you're writing a research paper. Level heading 1s are main points, level heading 2s are subpoints of level heading 1s, and then level heading 3 are subpoints of level heading 2. If you're going to use levels of headings, make sure there is at least some content within below those level headings. Otherwise, why have a level heading? If you are going to create a table, you can create a generic table, but in the table design, find which type of table you want to highlight. So anytime there is a main color that is at the top and then also on the side, it's basically identifying in the screen reader that the headings are the first row and then the column. If you only want to identify the row as the heading, then use a different style. Just be careful on the color contrast. When you do this, a green on white is a little bit difficult to read. So you need to consider, do I need to increase the text size or do I need to bold it? So what I would like for you to do for practice is type in your name in level heading 1, the school that you belong to, make sure that there is a gap. And then let's go ahead and insert a table. If you can do 5 columns, or yeah, 5 columns, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as your level heading 1. And then however, like what classes you teach during each day of the week. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and then we can share out. So your name, have a gap, the college that you belong to, and then what your schedule looks like Monday through Friday in a table. And I'm actually going to delete that because I did not have enough. Did everybody get a table? And I'm going to increase my text size so it would be easier to read. So the screen reader would actually read your table, identifying that the days of the week is your heading and then the content under each of the columns. This helps a lot, but you also need to provide alt text for your tables. So in order to provide an alt text to your table, right click if you're using a PC, 2-finger down if you're using a Mac. And then you need to go to table properties. And then find the tab that says alt text, a title. Make sure that it is meaningful. And then in this case, because we are using an inserted table, it can already read the text, so we don't have to be descriptive. and then hit OK. So a screen reader will actually provide a description of that table before it will actually read that table. So again, for that, in the table, right click if you're using a PC, 2-finger if you're using a Mac, table properties, alt text, make sure you have a title for that table, and then make sure that you have a description for that table. And then once you're done, hit OK. How are we doing? Feedback is welcome. And I need to know where you're at. Images are the same thing as well. Click on the image, right click or 2-finger down. And then a box will come up. We can do a thumbs up if we're doing good. Perfect. Okay. Every time I create a section of content, what I generally like to do is run an accessibility checker. So for that, go to Review, check accessibility, and you can only check alt text if that's what you want, a focus or the entire bit. So notice it came up with a warning, hard to read text contrast. When you click more on that information, it will give you where exactly the problem is. And it does not like the white with the black. So you can either modify the style or consider changing the color scheme. And it looks like that got rewritten. Once you get that fixed, it then removes it. So with Canvas, I'm going to leave the student view. In the edit tool, you have the accessibility checker. You want the balloons. If you don't have the balloons, it will actually tell you step by step how to fix the problem and just follow the prompts. And then of course, save. Does anybody have any questions right now? In terms of accessibility, it is a lot. The first step is to make sure that you are comfortable with the word processing tools that you have available and use what is already built in. Anytime you go fancy, it becomes problematic. If you want to have pretty PowerPoints, if you're using Canva, just note that you have additional things that you have to do to ensure that it is accessible, because Canva by default is not accessible. So you actually have to take more steps to make it accessible.